Welcome to Dying in Grace, the program that talks about death and dying with the intention of integrating life and death as part of a natural cycle. We always knew how to take care of each other, and we want to relearn what we've known from the time we hit the planet. My name is Arlene Stepputat, and each week I like to invite a community member with a special expertise to talk about some aspect of death and dying. This week I am delighted to invite my guest, introduce my guest, Rich Block, who is the CEO of the Santa Barbara Zoo. So thank you so much, Rich, for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
So,
thank you for saying that I'm an expert.
Of course you're an expert.
I have to tell my team that I'm an expert now.
Well, yeah, I see you as my expert, and in full disclosure, I also volunteer at the zoo, so you're also my leader, so all those things. So before we talk about animals and animal loss at the zoo, I wanted to just first ask you, how did you get involved with a zoo?
Well, I'm kind of an accidental zoo director. Beginning in college and kind of after that, I had loads of opportunities to do kind of conservation work, environmental work. And when I was teaching at the University of Michigan, a good friend of mine was working at the Cincinnati Zoo. And I spent a lot of time with him at the zoo and saw the incredible potential for education and conservation, two things I'm very passionate about. And that got me interested in zoos, and then the rest of it was pretty evolutionary. So I just got lucky at one point and ended up here in Santa Barbara 21 years ago. So it's been exciting.
It's 21, so more than 2 decades of service to our community.
Right, and what a great place to work.
Oh yeah, it's a gem in our community for sure. So this year in particular, the zoo has experienced loss of some of the most beloved members, animal members of our collection. I don't know what the right word is for the zoo.
Our zoo family.
Our zoo family, and I wanted to talk to you about the impact. And the first one, I think the one that people are still working with is the death of Suzi. Sujatha, our elephant. And so for people who don't know, can you tell us a little bit about Sujatha and her companion Little Mac, and just a little bit how they came to the zoo?
Right, so these two female Asian elephants were both born in India. Sujatha was born into a logging camp, and Mac was found kind of abandoned and was brought to that camp. Ultimately, they were moved to the Mysore Zoo, and the Mysore Zoo exchanged those two elephants for California sea lions. So it was an exchange, and so the estimate is that they were born in 1971, and they arrived here in Santa Barbara in 1972. So up until her death, Sujatha was a Santa Barbara resident for basically almost all of her entire life. And
so that would put them at 48 now?
Right.
She died at 48 years old. Okay.
So that is the median life expectancy for Asian elephants in zoos. So both of them were kind of right there at that median. But all animals, just like people, are unique, and as we age, we all develop different challenges, and I'm no different. I have some specific physical challenges that are just age-related, and so the care providers, the keepers, are responsible for those animals, actually do everything they can, sometimes going to extraordinary lengths, to try to deal with kind of pain management and extended care. And that's one reason why for many of the animals at the Santa Barbara Zoo, they live past what would be kind of average life expectancy.
Right, so we just, another beloved friend we lost this year, well, we lost both of our snow leopards, but I believe when Everett passed, he was the oldest snow leopard in captivity, the second oldest.
Yeah,
you know?
the oldest under human care that we could identify anywhere in the world. And Zoe was a little younger. She had passed before he did, by a couple of months. But even in that case, she was kind of an older cat. Large cats in the wild, in their early teens at best, if they make it that long. In zoo settings where they receive a lot of care, especially where they can get specialized medical care over time, you know, they outlive that wildlife expectancy by a significant number of years. As a matter of fact, one of the lions that was here when I arrived, Callie, ended up being over 22 years old when she finally passed away. And that is like way off the actuarial charts for lions. So as we look at an aging collection, it's not unreasonable to anticipate that you're going to start losing some of those animals as they age. Fortunately, Chadwick, our very elderly a male lion, kind of hangs in there and responds well to medical treatments and care, seems to be quite comfortable. And because of the training programs, we basically work with the animals and they do what they want to do. You know, we provide opportunities for engagement, and if they want to participate in some training or an activity, it's totally up to them to do that. You know,
it's not unlike how we deal with our elders. So, you know, I am currently still a volunteer with hospice, and I'm currently working with a woman that's 100 years old, and I've worked with a woman that was 107 years old. So you know, our lifespan, there's a lot of people that are living a long time, and yet when either one of these women, when they finally pass, it's not going to be any easier on their children and their loved ones. I mean, yes, it's a good life and they know it's coming and they can see it, but when that happens, it doesn't make it any easier. You can say, yes, they had a good life, but you're still in great pain. And
I think some of the times we say that for ourselves. You know, it's reassuring to say, well, they had a full life.
Right. Well, yeah, because we heard.
And so that's our response to that, to try to balance out some of that personal pain. Now, the relationship between keepers and the animals in the zoo is a remarkably close relationship. But it's really different from a pet. Yeah. Where you have this kind of constant physical interaction. My favorite beagle slept on the bed with us. Right. I cannot think of a zoo animal that I would want sleeping in the bed with me, especially
I know I have
large cats.
Those fantasies, though. I just went to Australia and was able to hold a koala for a moment, and I know it's not optimal, but I could see myself taking a koala home with me.
So, but you know, the bottom line is that they have a relationship with these animals, and it really is difficult for them to see over time, especially if they're aging, to see them have difficulty with mobility or their diet. And because every single day the keepers are watching these animals closely, they are developing programs to try to encourage natural behaviors and keep their lives interesting. And so this is a very special relationship. And to watch an animal over time just go through this kind of natural aging is still difficult, in the same way that it's difficult to see a parent lose some abilities. And certainly with the animals, the communication is very different from a person, where you can see that they're losing cognitive ability or memory. But for animals, you know, keepers are saddened if they're not as responsive to things, if they look like they're not kind of as sharp or kind of on their game, so to speak. So imagine, you know, in the case of the elephants, our lead keeper had over 10 years of experience with the elephants, and especially with the elephants, because there the relationship really is, there's a tactile component to that as well.
Right.
That's it's very difficult to deal with that. And so, I mean, I'm you know, if you want to call it a grieving process or what people go through with that, I still personally have this sense that I'm going to see Suzi or Sujatha when I go up to the elephant exhibit.
So you get surprised.
Right, and I have to remind myself that Mac is there, and seeing Mac brings no less kind of joy and energy to my experience. But there is a sense of loss that continues when I go there, and she's not there.
Yeah, half of who we're used to is not there.
Right, and so, I mean, these are adjustments that people have. I have to keep reminding myself to say elephant as opposed to elephants.
Right.
And you could say, well, that's just habit. But part of it is that I continue to think of our family with two elephants.
Right.
And so I
think. So let me just, and I don't know all the circumstances, so I would imagine there's times when you discover an animal has passed. You know, they just die a natural death, if you will, and you know, you go to the cage and like, oh, there's someone who's passed. And
that was the case with Zoe.
So they just discovered that she died, and there's some peace in that. In a way, I think there's some shock, but there's some peace, like, oh, okay, she died a natural death. Now with Suzi, the process of deciding to euthanize, and certainly people who are pet owners can understand the agony about that. And I know it's done with great care. Can you talk a little bit about the process for all of you and the zookeeper and the vet staff and
Sure, and there actually is kind of a quality of life assessment that they go through, and it's something that will start kind of very early in the process. It's not something that you start when things just look terrible, because what they're doing is they're looking at all aspects of quality of life, and that has to do with, you know, her diet, her behavior, her physical condition. If they are treating a physical condition, it could be arthritis, something that we know causes discomfort. And they can see that in the way an animal moves.
So, and you're assessing all the animals in the zoo all the time. I mean, isn't that,
the
keepers are that part of what they're monitoring of the, because just because an animal isn't older doesn't mean they might not have some health challenge, just like humans.
Right. So every single day, and I don't mean like for the hissing cockroaches, although they will write kind of a general assessment.
What's going on,
But for kind of those significant animals, meaning that, you know, they're large enough to be able to have kind of an identity. So everything from all of the birds to the armadillos, which, you know, are pretty compact, to the frogs and the lizards, they all get individual reports. So every single day, keepers take time to write reports on these animals, and all of that goes into this huge database. And what that does is give them the ability to go back and look at changes in behavior, anything that may relate to changes in health. So they'll know if they're off their diet. They'll know if there's a behavior that's developing that they can pay more attention to. And in terms of mobility, they can note whether, you know, if an animal is favoring a leg, a wing, whatever it might be, and this is in their notes. And then when they work with the veterinary staff, there's going to be a whole nother layer of information about that animal that talks about kind of their physical condition. And then every year, just like people, should be going in to
get an annual exam.
Exactly, and so we do that with the animals as well. And there's a huge investment in care. So you can imagine after that huge investment and everything else, to lose an animal.
Or decide that you must.
Right.
So like in
Susie's
Suzi's case, and I know Suzi was, declining to a degree, but then, the decision to euthanize. And can you talk about that process of the decision, and then, what happened to her? I think people don't understand how the zoo uses the animals that die to help with research, etc.
Sure.
So if you can just help us understand what happens, because people don't understand all the complexities of what happens.
Right. So in Sujatha's case specifically, her health was being very closely monitored over a period of more than a year, actually probably about 2 to 2.5 years. And that's when they started to really notice declines. Mm-hmm. So just like people, you have good days and bad days, and so there will be these little kind of hiccups along the way. And while those are noted, they don't become this major focus of concern. It kind of happens, it's noted, and things get back to some normal.
Right.
In this case, though, there was deterioration that they could note and became measurable over time. And, and it was kind of what I went through. I had this just absolute favorite beagle that I loved to pieces. And there is a point where you worry that you waited too long.
Right. You don't want to have suffering.
Right. That they suffered longer than they needed to for us.
Right, because we couldn't make the decision.
Right, and so in the case of my beagle, that's actually what kind of pushed me to realize that I really had waited too long. Uh-huh. And that made it even worse.
Sure.
Because now I felt
guilty.
Yeah, I felt guilty. I felt terrible. So the decisions with the animals at the zoo are no less difficult than that. And we do have to step back, and it really is a group assessment. So it's the keepers that are providing this daily care. It's a veterinary staff that knows medical conditions and prospects for treatment and recovery. Right. And all of those things are factored together to try to decide at what point have we moved into an area where we really can't provide any pain relief, we can't manage pain, we can't provide a path forward for treatment.
It's time for hospice.
And then so you're kind of in that position where you realize you are out of options.
Right.
And that's a really difficult point to kind of arrive at. And so even once you're kind of there is, this kind of hesitation, partly because of people's attachment to these animals.
Well, certainly those two were such a community draw. I mean, it's kind of like when Gemina died, too, the giraffe with the crooked neck that had a book written about her. I mean, and I know just as a penguin docent, all the questions I get every time about where's Lucky, how's he doing, so there's these personalities and favorite beloved things, especially with, the elephants. People, they're generational. People remember when they were kids and now they're taking their kids. So there's this deep community attachment.
Right. Long-lived animals. That is a connection that gets developed between the community and the animals, but also for keepers that have a long-term engagement with those particular animals. So gorillas in particular, there's a closeness.
Well, there's a love. I mean, I know the relationship is that, but I can't believe that people don't. The keepers are there because they love animals and they love their animals. That's the care, the devotion. Absolutely. It's love, and so when we love and we have to say goodbye to those we love, it doesn't matter whether you have fur, feathers, or skin. It's hard.
Sure, and in many cases, we reach out and communicate with those people that historically had a relationship with these animals to let them know as well. So it's not like they kind of go away and people that knew them before are kind of out of the equation. The fact is that that entire group associated with the care of those animals is brought together and informed.
And you have some signage at the zoo that explains a little bit about where little Mac is now. And I know I visited zoos. There's a zoo in, I think it was Phoenix, that had a lion and kind of did an obituary and a memorial with the picture of the lion and the years and who that lion was, as a way to acknowledge to people that how come the cage only has one, where's so-and-so, you know, that kind of thing.
Right, so Gemina actually has a large brass interpretive plaque that's mounted up over the giraffe exhibit. And her,
the replica of her skeleton is in the Discovery Pavilion too.
Right, and part of that is just the natural curiosity about an animal that lived with what people would think might be a debilitating deformity or feature, actually lived a very full, fairly normal giraffe life. The one thing she could do is look around corners better than other giraffes. But the reality is that she was a great role model for anyone that's kind of dealing with some kind of a challenge, physical challenge, to realize that, you know what, you can survive. You can make it work.
You can look a little different from everybody else, but still have a normal life, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. You know? And as a matter of fact, that's why she'd been on a number of television shows over the years that made that point, but also just kind of the uniqueness that there aren't a lot of giraffes with that right angle in their neck. So I would say probably of all of our animals, she was the most notable, best known.
Right.
And years ago, when the news press did a special feature on the personalities of Santa Barbara, and
she was one of them?
She was the only animal in the personalities amongst movie stars and musicians and other people.
But she was a celebrity.
Absolutely.
And I think, you know, so with the passing of Suzi, and I know that people are still really concerned. I know people still ask. So there's grieving going on still in the community, a discovery like where's the other elephant and what happened.
Yeah.
And the question people ask a lot is, is Little Mac grieving? You know, and so the question is, you know, we don't like to anthropomorphize our animals, but I know that when Suzi died, you let Mac hang out with her for a while.
We did, and as a matter of fact, we had planned that into the process. We didn't have kind of a time set that, you know, okay, your 5 minutes are up. It really was totally for her to tell us, because there are lots of examples, especially in elephants, of the behavior of elephants over a member of a herd that's died, and the behavior of the rest of the herd or an individual over time. So we know that there's a process going on. I mean, I don't want to inject what I think that process is, but we know something's going on there. And so we did allow for that. And we actually moved Suzi's body to a portion of the yard where Mac would have easier access. And she was in the barn at that point, and we opened the doors up, and she came out and literally just walked right past Suzi and went to a corner of the yard and was there for a couple of minutes, and then literally walked right back into the barn. And so we just waited, and a short time later she came back out, and this time with her trunk, just kind of acknowledged that Suzi was there and checked her feet. And then went back to the other corner of the yard. And so there was never a point at which she spent an extended amount of time kind of with Suzi, but just over a period of well over an hour, she would just kind of pay a little bit of attention and then move on and come back. And then there was a point at which she just basically went back in the barn and didn't come back out, which is the point at which the team decided that they could move on.
So I want to just spend a little bit of time, because we're getting close, to talk about the other side, and that is some of the new zoo animals that have come in. So we recently got capybaras, and I mean, as we look at the cycle, we have some young. We've had baby otters, we've had baby giraffes. So we really, the zoo does
baby anteaters. We've done really well with anteaters.
Yeah. So I think it's just really important for all of us to acknowledge the life cycle that is at the zoo, and the emotions that we all have as community members, as zookeepers, as just people who love animals. That our grief and our missing and our sadness is all part of all of that, you know. And you know, if you haven't been at the Santa Barbara Zoo, please go see our latest animals, the capybaras, and just enjoy the gifts of the zoo. Rich, I just can't thank you enough for being here.
Oh, my pleasure.
And one of the things that we do when we do this program is we invite people to put the name of someone that they have lost, whether it's an animal or a human, in this book of Living Love. And it says, "To live in hearts we leave behind is not to die." So animal or human, if there's someone you'd like to add to our book of Living Love, I'm going to invite you.
Can I add more than one?
You can put in as many as you want. And while you're doing that, I want to thank my crew. Here, you can find that.
I'll do that.
I'd like to thank my crew, Elliot Jacobson, Michael Nicholson, TVSB, for allowing us to do this show. And thank you to our viewers. You can see past episodes on dyingingrace.com.